very, very grateful for that. When I think of one word to describe my dad, I think it was said a few minutes ago, and it's charismatic. My dad had a way of making people happy and drawing people in. People loved him. Everyone said, I love Joe. Sometimes he would drive you crazy, and other times he would make you laugh. Regardless, you'd forget about the crazy part. That's just what he was. He would bring people together, and he truly loved each and every one of you. I think of, these are unfortunate situations when you lose a loved one. And to some degree, I believe we learn something from this. I think we all do. This is a reminder of what we learn when we lose a loved one. 4 years ago, I unfortunately lost my mom. And as sad of an experience as that was, I learned something very important. What I learned is that life is short, and we need to embrace each other while we're still here. We all live very busy lives. We think tomorrow we'll do something. Tomorrow we'll call our parents, or next week we'll have dinner with someone we care about, or next summer we'll do something. But when you think about it, how many more summers do we truly have? Or how many more days do we have? Because one thing we know for certain is tomorrow is not a guarantee. So it was a reminder to me to be able to enjoy the remainder of my dad's life. Every Sunday, we would speak with each other on the phone. We had great conversations. We discussed sports, music, how our week was, and how our week coming up will be. They were great conversations. We laughed. I never rushed them. I really got to enjoy every time we spoke. And conversations continued to grow. They ended up being several times during the week. We would speak just to check in. My dad used to say, "Did I catch you at a bad time?" And my response is never. So I always really enjoyed being able to do that. We would text each other during sports games when we'd see great highlights that we wanted to share. But that was a lesson that I learned. As I said, tomorrow is not guaranteed, and we need to enjoy our loved ones as we can now. So on behalf of my dad, I just want to thank you all again for being here today. I want to tell you that not only did you mean so much to my dad, but each and every one of you were truly his best friend. Thank you.
Thank you. Gosh, that was beautiful. I do my first step. That was lovely. Joe passed peacefully, without uproar, in the repose hours as he always hoped for. Joe certainly never wanted to die in a hospital, so he consistently and often would say. God gave Joe the grace of a death at home, even as our faith ensures angels and saints were with him to welcome him to our true home. Joe passed his way. Joe was a real, I'll do it my way kind of guy, like the Frank Sinatra song says. Joe, a fellow crooner and a fellow Italian like Frank, is probably smiling right now, being compared to Sinatra. Well, yep, indeed, Joe always wanted to be at home when his time came, not in an ambulance or a hospital. And Joe knew a little something about hospitals. Many of you know, but others of you may not, that Joe lived daily with a severe heart condition for over 20 years and with lifelong diabetes. Well, if you fall in the group, gosh, I had no idea, that's because Joe was one of the bravest, strongest, carry on despite, uncomplaining, dust yourself off and get back into the saddle folks I know. And I admired him for that. Joe rarely complained, if ever, about his conditions. And as someone who has had her share of big procedures and surgeries, I can say firsthand, being sick is no stroll on the Coney Island boardwalk. But with Joe, he just kept going on, not complaining and being real private. Heck, more often than not, he hardly acknowledged he was ill or seemed to say thank you for the help. But let me say, when we spoke one-to-one, he always expressed profound gratitude for the unconditional care Mary Lou gave him over the years and right through the end. But Joe wasn't a man of mushy words. He didn't wear his diabetic or cardiac conditions on his sleeve. Heck, Joe wouldn't even wear a medical alert bracelet or device. And he was infamous for doing things like sending away the paramedics no sooner than after they arrived. But Joe was just that private sort. He didn't live out loud or overshare. And let me tell you, that's no small feat in a household of Italian women. Between Mary Lou, his late mother-in-law Marie, who he welcomed with open arms to live in the Wynwood house, and who he called Mom, and to me, his sister-in-law, one of us, or all of us, was always trying to tell him what to do regarding his health care. But Joe shrugged us off, channeling his inner Sinatra, doing it his way. Well, to my knowledge, Joe didn't share much about his illness with the Contorno side. He would say he wanted to shield them and not worry his sisters or his mom. He'd say he didn't want to burden Stefan, who had responsibility of raising his own family now. And he would yell, protest, make a brouhaha, get mad, don't call anyone, Mary Lou. And Mary Lou would nod okay, and then she'd go and call the family anyway, knowing they would want to be kept abreast. And in fact, sometimes she'd have to sneak to make the calls. So then I would come by the house or hospital, depending where he was, and what's the first thing Joe would say to me, smiling when I walked in? Can you believe everyone's calling me with love? Thanks to Mary Lou. That's what he'd say. And that's Joe, all right. He wasn't a live out loud sort of guy. In fact, sometimes he acted so stealth that I would joke to the family, is he in the CIA or FBI or witness protection program? But Joe was a proud man, a showman, someone who had two distinctly different but quite successful careers in his life. First as a performer and promoter of doo-wop music for over 25 years. He enjoyed success and made many friendships along the way, including with Tony, Al, and Frankie. In 2022, Joe received a Lifetime Achievement Award and was inducted in the East Coast Music Hall of Fame for his contribution to the music industry. Joe then went on to an equally successful career in finance. And Joe really enjoyed working. His work ethic was strong. He seldom missed a beat. He'd only go to the hospital if he had his work laptop with him. He dismissed a visiting physical therapist because he had a business call. He wouldn't have Mary Lou call his job at the time saying he broke his hip. I'm not even sure to this day if that job knew fully about the broken hip. Joe just kept working via Zoom. Joe, I did it my way, Contorno. Joe did love to work, and he remained vibrant, engaged, and relevant to the end. His current position at the Novo Group is where he finally was at. Tributes in the financial world describe Joe as a a go-to, helpful, solutions-oriented sort of guy. Joe knew his stuff. Joe was sharp at work. He had the wisdom of years and the kind of real knowledge before Google, the internet, and AI. Although he did rely on Julia to troubleshoot his phone for him. Even though Joe didn't graduate college, which was not uncommon in those days, Joe was a trove of facts, observations, and Joe was twice. He spoke of his children, Stephen and Julia, along with his grandkids, Jenna and Tyler, with bursting pride, marveling over each of their many accomplishments. He loved them all, including the sweetest and kindest daughter-in-law, Karen, Stephen's wife. Over the years, Joe really admired Stephen, and theirs was not only a father and son bond, but a man-to-man friendship. They enjoyed sports together and more. And Joe just couldn't contain himself when he spoke of his son's self-earned successes, especially Stephen's podcast and appearance on financial network shows. There was also a corny dad side to Joe. He was forever doing things to make Julia eye roll and groan. Dad, he'd say, a constant loop of, where's my little girl, all through the day, and no matter how much Julia would answer, he'd still ask. He'd make bunny ears out of cloth napkins at restaurants when Julia was 4, and still at 14. He was that dad clapping loudly, saying silly things to her middle school friends, breaking into song. Joe was the kind of dad who rushed home from work to bring Julia to Castle Park Playground, or who replaced Dorothy, the pet goldfish, before Julia got home in hopes she didn't realize Dorothy #1 went to her heavenly fishbowl. We've had a series of Dorothys. Joe was always feeding Julia fruit, especially blueberries, for antioxidants. Julia undoubtedly got her musical interest and entertainment industry interest from Joe. Because goodness, our side of the family can't carry a tune. And by the way, I think Julia still likes blueberries to this day. Joe may have been a typical corny dad who didn't always get it right by far, but he loved both his children dearly. And Julia's devotion to her dad growing up and the respect she showed, never complaining, was more a whisper than a trumpet heralding all she did. Because it was often Julia, from a young age, who helped Mary Lou, often in the middle of the night during his diabetic flare-ups, including calling for ambulances and visiting hospitals. Joe never gave up, and he saw Julia grow into young adulthood, graduate from the prestigious NYU Tisch School, become her own person, ready and able to leave the nest. And another last thing or two did you know about Joe? Joe had simple tastes. Now don't get me wrong, Joe was at home in a fine restaurant eating Kobe beef and oysters. He cut a dapper figure in a tuxedo, and he was at ease mingling with celebrities and CEOs. But the Joe I know liked dirty water hot dogs from the vending carts, a crumb bun, and an apple cider donut. He liked to talk grilling techniques with our brother-in-law Phil, and he'd like to take a run to White Castle with his friend Pascal, Pat. He liked reminiscing about growing up in Brooklyn as Joey with his mom, sisters, grandma, 3 cousins, and Aunt Mimi speaking French at home. Joe was content to garden and shop at Pastoz's, the local Italian market. And boy, did Joe love a bargain, from coupons to promos or samples. He was famous for bringing home oodles of swag from the many conferences he presented at or attended over the years. He was always giving someone some treasure: pens, keychain flashlights, golf towels, ice scrapers, and more. You name it. And no thanks, I'll pass was never an option. To this day, I venture to say, all his Chatham family can't open a drawer or a closet without finding some chopstick from Joe. Joe, in fact, attended a conference as recent as 2 weeks before his demise. He laughed while working with his boss the Friday before he passed, and wouldn't you know it, in his house was his open work laptop and a huge carton of swag from that last conference. So I rather think when Joe met Jesus, angels, and saints and was welcomed by our loved ones gone before, his first words probably was, "I brought swag for everyone in heaven." Well, that's the thing about heaven. All is well, all is pure joy. Our woes, frailties, mistakes, uncertainties, struggles here are replaced by pure ecstasy love. Joe's at peace, and I hope you will remember Joe, and I know you will. And when you do, make haste. Hug your family, call a friend, do something simple like that cup of espresso, that oldies radio song, a trip to White Castle, or maybe have a business lunch or whatnot. But hold those small moments in memory of Joe Contorno. So this weekend is All Souls Day, and today is All Saints Day. So please pray for Joe and all our deceased loved ones each of us carry in our hearts, and may heaven comfort everyone.
Frankie, did you want to say something? Were you okay? Did you want to say something?
Well,
You want to come up?
sure.
Frankie is Joe's music buddy forever.
Yeah. How you doing, everybody? Well, it's hard to add to what's been said already. So many wonderful things about this generous, caring man. Perhaps I could just highlight some of our career together, how we met. It goes back to 1971, 72 down Wall Street. Talked on the phone for a while, and one day we decided to get together for lunch. Just come on, let's go for lunch. It's all right. Sat down, we talked about 10 minutes worth of business, an hour worth of doo-wop music, an hour worth of growing up in Brooklyn, how it was. It was amazing lunch. After 3 martinis, we got connected. We were made for each other. It was a good time, and I noticed one thing. This man could eat. Jeez. He had a big appetite, Joe. Loved his food. It was enjoyable to go out with him all the time. So as the years went on, we got together on the phone, talked every day. We were doing business, and we just went out at night. And business was our biggest thing on Wall Street. Maybe like in 1977, we got together at a party, and a lot's been mentioned about the music, the doo-wop shows, and a little bit. But it didn't just come about like that. It was a lot of work. And we had the idea of putting some groups together, because we heard people sing along at a party, that would be fun. to do a show to put these groups out there, people would come and see and enjoy. But it wasn't really easy to get all of these groups at that point. There was no internet, there was no contact. How did we start? We didn't really know. So as luck would have it, we ran into eventually a gentleman that worked at an agency, a talent agency, that represented groups. And he said, come by my office and we'll talk about, getting something together for you guys, what you like to do. And we sat in his office, and Joe was so excited to give us the list of groups. I mean, these groups are available. The teenagers, the mystics, the passions, And Joe said, what about the Skyliners? As you mentioned before, Stefan, his favorite. Well, we got the Skyliners. Okay, well, great, okay. Says, you guys go sit down, see what you want to do, get a venue, let me know, and we can work together. But we didn't really know what to do at that point. So we went to our good friend over at CBS, Norman Knight, who Joe just saw recently when he went to Cleveland on his business trips. And we had a lot of fun with him going to the Hall of Fame in Cleveland. And we were going to go recently to see him again. We went to dinner last week with Al and Tony. You mentioned on Joe's next business trip, we would go to Cleveland and see Norm. Anyway, at that point, Norm introduced us to a gentleman that had great experience in production, Tony DeLauro. It was really, about the producing end of it, how a package a show and go to a venue and put it together. Tony did. He got great experience in this. So we became a threesome. And we began our journey. And our first 2 years at the Beacon were wonderful. Matter of fact, our first show at the Beacon Theater, the Skylines closed. And after that weekend, Joe invited the Skylines, that's who he was, to his house for a barbecue. We sat there, we had a great little time. Joe was like that, just loved it, and invited anyone to his place. As a matter of fact, I remember the time, 1980, Joe was in the hospital, it was during the holidays, he had surgery. My mother had passed away, we weren't really celebrating Christmas that much, weren't in the mood. And in this hospital bed, I went to see him, I was by his bedside, he said to me, I want you and your whole family to come to my house. It was 15 of us, my sisters, everybody, my kids. And we went, we had a wonderful time. But that's who he was, caring about people all the time. His generosity was incredible, So we began our journey with Radio City after that for 20 years and lots of fun. And I remember one night, walking along 6th Avenue, and we saw the marquee of Radio City and the Royal Dulup show, how proud he was. And he looked over to me and he said, Frankie, if he died today, he says, I'll be okay because of what we achieved over the last 20 years together. And, we had a point, and I said, yeah, I guess so. And so many memories that we did together. And just off the top of my head, I remember, and Stephan, you remember 1986, Game 6 of the World Series. We went to Pasadena, 1977 Super Bowl. Downtown Athletic Club was one of Joe's favorite places we'd always go to, the DAC down Wall Street. Introduced me to Muhammad Ali down there. And of course, remember our great trip to Dodger Town, Steph, right?
I do.
Vero Beach, and we went to see the Dodgers, and we're all Brooklyn Dodger fans, of course. So we had so many great memories. And, it was just so much that you could remember forever. And one of the things Joe always said about life, and it was kind of a funny line, but he always used it. And he would say, when you wake up in the morning, half your problems are solved. And you wake up, they're all solved. And maybe today, it's, our problem is living without this wonderful man. And I'll just share this one last thing, and it's I don't know about the afterlife and what goes on, but when Stephan called me Monday morning, I was in my car in the parking lot, 8 o'clock in the morning, I see his name come up, I was saying, okay. So I started picking up the phone right away, okay, and told me Dad passed away. After our devastating news in this conversation, I just sat there in the car. Radio went back on. And it was just amazing. The Skyliners sang,
Oh my God.
and I just said to myself, it was his way of saying to me, hi Frank, I'm doing okay. And that was Joe thinking of others all the time. God bless you, my friend, I'll miss you, I love you.
Thank you.
Yep.
But at 3:30, I'd like to invite everybody to have a meal to celebrate Joe afterwards, because he would like everyone to toast to him more than be sad. So at 3:30, it's Brooklyn Country Club, which is only down the street. You go down Main Street and turn on Brooklyn. It's Brooklyn Country Club.
I'll have to present my GPS, I forgot to write.
Contorno, who is from the, Al,
Yeah, the big album.
Yes.
the Mystics, Al Contorno.
Sing a song.
Sing. We'll put the music back on and sing.
Oh.